Welcome to the 2021 WCA Annual Staff Meeting. The next item of agenda is the approval of the minutes of the previous annual meeting. You can find those minutes in the folder that was posted on the WCA website. All of those in favor of approving those minutes from the previous annual meeting, please raise your hand using the reactions feature on Zoom and leave it up until the votes are counted. Please be sure to use the raise hand, not one of the individual reactions like thumbs up or something like that, because those go away after a few seconds. I'm seeing in the chat that a few people do not have a raise hand option in the reactions menu. If that is the case, then you could simply type yes in the chat.
Bob, we've had a few people join since the notice of.
I'll repeat for them. So currently we're in the stage where we are approving the minutes of the previous annual meeting. If you do approve those minutes, please use the raise hand feature in the reactions menu to signify your approval of those minutes. If you do not have the raise hand feature in the reactions menu, you may alternatively type yes in the chat. Please leave your hand up until all yes votes are counted, and then we'll move to the next stage.
I count 55 and 5.
Are we done counting the yeses?
Yes, the yeses are
Please lower your hands.
Right.
Okay, I believe all hands are now lowered except for one. I think they're all down now. Okay, those who oppose the approval of the minutes of the previous annual meeting, please raise your hand now. If you don't have the raise hand option and you oppose the approval of those minutes, you may type no in the chat. I'll give you a few more seconds, but I don't see any hands up. Okay. And lastly,
great
those
hold
who
from-
abstain from voting of the approval of the minutes of the previous annual meeting, please raise your hands. If you do not have the raise hand option in the reactions menu, you may instead type abstain in the chat. Okay, I'm again seeing no hands. So we did have a majority
Yeah,
for,
54 approvals, 1 abstention. So that
okay. So that now passes. Those minutes of the previous annual meeting are approved. The next item on the agenda is the executive director's activity statement. So this has been a year of rebuilding. In March 2020, as a result of the pandemic, we were forced to halt competitions completely. As things slowly improved, we were able to safely host 38 competitions in the second half of last year. Over the past few months, the board has begun to lift restrictions on competitions, and competitions are slowly returning around the world. So far this year, there have been 145 competitions held, with at least another 46 currently scheduled through December. While we were hoping that the 2021 WCA World Championship would be one of those competitions, we had no choice but to make the difficult decision to cancel that competition due to the ongoing uncertainty and to ensure the safety of our competitors. That was a difficult decision for all who were involved and was not made lightly. We're optimistic that all 6 of the 2022 Continental Championships will be able to proceed, and we look forward to the 2023 World Championship in the Republic of Korea. The next item on the agenda is the financial report for 2020. And for that, we turn over to James.
Hello. So I will do the same as last year. I'll briefly run through all the figures and explain it in a less accountancy term so everyone can understand. So as expected, as mentioned by Bob, we had much fewer competitions last year. Between March and July, there was 1 competition, and then in the following months, there were 10 or fewer competitions in each month, when generally we would expect that many on any given weekend. So as a result, the revenue, because of the WCA dues, were down significantly, down 62% from last year. And as a result, that also led to lower admin and operating costs. As well as the lack of competitions in the later half of the year, we couldn't really spend on furtherance. Furtherance is generally for buying equipment for countries that cannot afford it, or sending delegates out to countries that don't have delegates, that can't afford to pay for one to be flown out themselves. And so fewer furtherance expenses there. The WCA gear team, as you can see, last year we had a significant loss. This year we had a significant gain. The reason for this is just purely a timing thing. The way the gear team works is delegates will order gear. We get charged by speed stacks. We then invoice the delegate for that cost, and then they pay us. So there's this small timing issue. There was a lot of gear purchased at the end of 2019 that we didn't get invoiced until the start of 2020. As a result, we spent a lot of money in 2019, which we gained into 2020. So that explains that difference. And going forward, we would expect the gear team to be fairly a fairly net income of 0, something along those lines. Cash and cash equivalents are basically what money is owed to us. So having cash and cash equivalents is basically saying these people owe us money. This is usually, again, for things from the gear team, dues which have been issued but not paid. Delegates have 30 days to pay, so it's well within their right to not pay immediately. So again, usually these are just timing things. As you can see, this year we have a huge increase in expenditure on trademarks. This is because we have paid for all of these trademarks in various countries all over the world for the World Cube Association itself. And as a result, this is now part of our organization. This money has been spent, but it's not lost. It still retains value to us. And so this sits on our balance sheet as a figure permanently until we either spend money to adjust those trademarks, or if we ever lose the trademark for whatever reason, or decide to move on to a different trademark, for example. So this now adds value to our organization. The legal fee retainer is just a retainer we have to keep with the legal company we work with, so that if they ever charge us for legal expenses, it is held and they can just take out of that and we top up the retainer. It's just to show them that we're basically paying in advance for work that they will do. And then, so that's where we are in terms of net income, much down, and then balance sheet is much up. In terms of specifically to the revenue, the donations are slightly decreased from last year. However, earlier this year in 2021, we did set up extra donation buttons on the WCA website. And so going into 2021, we would expect this amount to increase slightly, as it is more accessible and easier to donate for any given person. As mentioned before, the WCA dues income were massively decreased. And then the other revenue could be from anything that is like cash back from a card or whatever. Admin and operating costs. As you can see, the legal expenses are very low, and this is because most of our legal expenses are trademarks. So that was the thing on the balance sheet I mentioned earlier. We retain that value instead of it being a cost that is one time and lost forever. Subscriptions, insurance, these are still the same because we still have to pay the same subscriptions and insurances, even though competitions weren't running as normal in 2020. Bank and finance charges are usually costs related to foreign exchange, things like this. As we've paid for fewer things in other countries, we've not, quote unquote, lost money on things like foreign exchange and stuff. On the furtherance expenses, the website costs have increased. This is due to, well, all of the changes that are happening with the WCA and the popularity of the website. The server costs need to be paid for to be upheld. Last year, we also had a little bit of an issue getting a non-profit discount for our website hosting costs. So I would honestly expect this to drop for 2021, but I would, in general, over a long span of time, website costs could vary a lot depending on how popular the WCA is, how much people are using the website, and things like that. And obviously with COVID, a lot more people were, instead of going to competitions, trying to keep up to date with what was going on the WCA website. And so there's just an amount of traffic we need to accommodate. As before, I mentioned the travel reimbursement and equipment funding way down. No competitions, nobody needed to travel or purchase equipment. And obviously, unfortunately, there were no championships in 2020 either. And so we had zero expenditure in the championship booths. And then the WCA gear team section, this is just a breakdown of what I mentioned earlier. So as you can see, last year, the equipment recharge, this was the money we got in from delegates, and the equipment purchase was much higher than that recharge amount. And that was just that timing difference I mentioned over the 2019 to 2020 period. And so at the start of 2020, we got all that recharge from the purchase from 2019. And that's why the equipment recharge is much higher this year and the purchase is much down. Going forward into 2021 and onwards, we would expect the postage and delivery to go up along with the equipment purchase amount, but the equipment recharge should stay roughly in line with that, as we shouldn't have these year-to-year timing differences as severe as they were here. And that is the 2020 financial report, and this is available on the WCA website at any time under the documents section.
Thank you, James. So the next step in the meeting is to accept that report, or to vote to accept that report. So we're going to follow the same voting procedure. Please raise your hand if you vote yes to accept the 2020 financial report. Alternatively, if you cannot raise your hand using the reactions menu, you may instead type the word yes in the chat. And please leave your hand raised until all votes are counted.
Please also remember to only submit a vote either by a hand or in the chat if you are a voting member with voting rights.
Count 56 in favour.
Thank you. You may please lower your hands. Okay, I believe all hands are now lowered. So those who are opposed to accepting the financial report for 2020, please raise your hand or alternatively type no in the chat. I see no hands raised and I do not see anything in the chat. Lastly, those who abstain from voting about the acceptance of the financial report for 2020, either raise your hand or write abstain in the chat. Once again, I see no hands and I do not see anything in the chat. Ethan, what is the final tally?
I count 56 in favour, 0 opposed and 0 abstentions. So motion
Okay.
passed.
Thank you. So that does pass. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of the WCA anti-doping program, which I'm going to pass over to Ethan to explain with more context.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. So as you are aware, it was discussed at the annual staff meeting last year. We discussed the possibility of the WCA registering as a sports organisation for speed cubing. It's a long process. It's something that we have spent a lot of time on, and it's something that if we continue to pursue, we will spend a lot more time on. The process has a lot of loopholes to jump through, one of which, the major one being the adoption of anti-doping rules in line with the World Anti-Doping Code. As staff are aware, there has been an email thread since the start of September for the ability to ask questions on this. The outline of it is that it will be a fairly watered down thing. It's not going to be something that is noticeable for the large majority of the community. Additionally, the registering of the WCA as a sports organisation is something that is going to be quite beneficial, specifically to regional organisations who have informed us that they will be able to access much more funding as a registered regional sports organisation. And additionally to the WCA, the funding from memory is in the range for just a sports organisation around $30,000 to $300,000. This extends further you get into recognition and further towards the IOC recognition, which we don't have too many details publicly available. That's kind of how the process is. But in terms of why we are adopting an anti-doping policy, it is not because we suspect people are cheating. It is a compliance measure to ensure that we comply with what is required to apply as an official sports organisation. So what we have had the last month and a bit for staff to ask questions on the email thread. What I will do now is we can have a short time. If there are any burning questions you feel were not answered, we can answer them now. So we can have a short, if you have a question, you can raise your hand. Otherwise, we will go to a vote on this matter shortly. Yes, Danny.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear.
I wanted to ask if this means that it would be registered as a sports organization worldwide, or it only applies to a certain list of countries?
The WCA would be registered as a sports organisation worldwide, which then allows the regional organisations to apply as regional sports organisations in their country.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, so with no more questions, we'll put this to a vote. Those in favor of adopting the WCA anti-doping program, please raise your hand using the reactions menu. Or alternatively, if you cannot use that menu to raise your hand, you may type yes in the chat and leave your hand raised until all votes are counted. Ethan, can you address Tim's question from the chat?
Yep, so 2 seconds. Yep. So
Sorry, just to clarify, I was going to raise my hand, but I can't without voting. Yes, I missed the fact where we were going to be voting to adopt something. I am reviewing the email that you sent out at the beginning of September, Ethan. And I don't see a concrete proposal or exactly what we're adopting right now. So I guess my question is, what weight does this vote carry?
So yeah, if this vote passes, we'll continue working towards adopting a set of anti-doping rules that are in line with the code. There's little flexibility on what the rules can say, so it's not really how much we decide to do per se. It's you either accept the rules or you don't accept those rules. The program, I believe the details of what the program would look like were briefly mentioned at the start. It would be very limited testing. Did you have any specific concerns or?
Yeah, sorry, my question was just because we were voting to adopt a program that, as far as I could tell in the email, there isn't a specific program like proposed. It sounds to me like, from what you described, like we are proposing going down the path of creating a program.
Yeah, that's provided this vote passes, we would not call another vote onto the anti-doping rules that would be imposed.
Thank you.
count 47 in favour.
Thank you. You may lower your hands. Okay, I believe all hands are lowered. If you are opposed to the adoption of the WCA anti-doping program, please raise your hand. Alternatively, you may type no in the chat.
I count 10 opposed.
Okay, thank you. You may lower your hands. Okay, and those who abstain, please raise your hand or alternatively type abstain in the chat. Ethan, are there any abstentions?
No, I count 0 abstentions.
Okay, so then by a majority of 47 to 10, that will pass. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the date and place of the next meeting. The meeting is held annually in October, and due to the nature of our organization, the meeting will once again be online, as it would not be practical to have a physical meeting in which members are able to attend. So in closing, we thank everybody for their attendance, and to those of you who joined to stream this live. And we will conclude this meeting with a staff meeting to follow. Okay, so as this meeting concludes, those of you who are on staff may continue to stay on the call for the second half. Thank you all for attending.